Over the past several weeks of February, we've been celebrating Black History Month thanks to the support of Samtec Cares and MAC Construction. We've brought you Black history and history makers of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We've cast a spotlight on Black-owned businesses and business owners and amplified a variety of voices. Today, that includes Cathy Scrivner, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for Integrity Development. She's also a Southern Indiana resident, and I appreciate you taking the time. Cathy, let's start with your role. What does that mean? What do you do as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for Integrity Development?
Well, first of all, Angie, just thank you for having me. It's certainly my pleasure, and excited about our conversation today. Just to give you a little bit of information, diversity, equity, and inclusion senior consultant means that we really focus. For 23 years, I've been working with Integrity Development, walking into companies, helping to assess their culture, and then training leadership and employees alike on the conversation, and actually being able to have a conversation that's not contentious, where we're all learning about differences, etc. So probably in the last, I would say 23 years, I've trained at least, I actually stopped counting, but about 17,000 people probably by now. And I've taught various leadership classes, but many of them having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's been our focus and expertise as a consulting firm. So,
what has it been like, especially after 2020? I mean, COVID was a certain part of that, of course, and continues to be, but I mean, it really opened wide the conversation and more, far more than just conversation when it comes to race in America.
Right. I would say it's really been different for Integrity Development in that we have just been just deluged with companies coming, asking for help and more information and wanting to learn more. So that's exciting in itself. I also think, as I've been facilitating for the last year classes via Zoom, that we've had more honest conversations. I think prior to what happened in 2020 and the whole social unrest and all of that around race, we weren't as, at liberal, to actually talk about race. I mean, race was a part of the conversation, but we really had to balance that because we didn't want, we wanted to value diversity across cultures, period. But race, we had to be careful not to spend too much time. We didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. The difference now is people want to understand. They want to learn. They want to ask questions that maybe they wouldn't have an opportunity to ask anywhere else. And so I think it's opened up the conversation for real honesty and transparency and for people to genuinely want to learn.
In what you do, I mean, obviously you are hired to come and talk and to consult and to facilitate. But what recommendations, Cathy, do you have for people, I guess, really on a personal level when it comes to talking about race? It can be so hard if they don't have someone who has been doing this for decades, like you, to facilitate a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, I mean, how do we remedy that, just neighbor to neighbor?
Absolutely. One of the things that I would recommend is perspective taking. I think that so often we don't do a great job of really trying to get the perspective of other people. And so perspective taking to me means looking at diverse perspectives. I'll give you an example in this political climate that we're in right now. I mean, people tend to have their favorite news channel, whether it's Fox or CNN or whatever, MSNBC or whatever. Perspective taking means I don't just tune into that one particular channel and listen and have everything that channel is saying validate my perspective, but I'm really interested in other perspectives. I'm trying to find what's legitimate about other perspectives. So for me, I listen to Fox, I listen to MSNBC, I listen to Sean Hannity, I listen to BBC, I listen to MSNBC, NPR, all of those things, looking for the truth from all of those perspectives. And we do that with people too. Sometimes we just assume everybody's having a great experience, and that might not be the case. I had, because of 2020, have many of my Caucasian friends call me and say, Kathy, why didn't you tell me? Well, there was never really an opportunity to tell people. What was I going to do? Just kind of bring it out of the blue? But to be asked, Kathy, what is it like? 60-year-old woman, Black woman living in America. Are your experiences different? And can you share them if they are? Some people may say no, some people may say yes, but you don't know until you ask. So perspective taking is one. And then developing strong relationships with people who are different than yourself. Strong relationships. Because when you develop strong relationships, what happens is that you don't have to be so politically correct. That people give you a whole lot more flexibility in the things that you say because they know your heart, they know who you are. And I think we don't do enough. If we did just those two things, getting perspectives from other people and their experience, I think it would open us up to be much more open minded and we would see things differently. And then developing strong, diverse relationships. Those are two important things that can be done. There are many others, but those are two important things I would suggest that we start with.
It's funny. You and I have talked before and been a part of a larger conversation with an organization, and we have varying kinds of experiences. But at the same time, Kathy, I think for me, I tell people all the time, I have never until 2020 been so cognizant about what I look like. I remember hearing, I'll just use his first name because it's his story to tell, but a man named Raymond, who is an executive at a bank and would as sharp a dresser as you can imagine. And regardless of what he was wearing, he said, I would not go to a gas station at night anymore alone. And I had never in my life felt like, if you made decisions about me now, of course, in hindsight, I'm starting to know and learn and dig deeper into some things, but it never occurred to me that it's what I look like. It's the color of my skin for anyone else's decisions, except I have been forced to really take a look at perspective and perspective taking, and also how am I perceived? This has been a year of discomfort, but also at the same time, as you said earlier, people are generally are willing to start going through this discomfort because they want to understand. Are you finding that over and over again, regardless?
I think that in many ways people are trying. They really hurt. And I think that for some reason, and I'll just my own personal experiences, my Caucasian friends many times just saw me as different. Kathy, you speak well, you're educated, you're this and that. And so didn't expect me to have experiences that reflect that it's been about my race. And so because I fit well, and I think having transparent conversations has really been helpful. I think it's been painful for others to hear it. I think that sometimes people resist it. I think you also, even my friends, some of them have resisted it. And I think you have to give people space enough to resist some of these conversations. They're difficult. And I think typically most people will come around and they're just getting some eye-opening experiences for 2020 have helped them to recognize there is some disparity here in America. And that's what they're starting to see a little bit around those differences, is racial differences and other differences as well. So I do feel encouraged when I think about how some people are embracing this conversation, wanting to learn more. And also, I also feel it's a little bit of a challenge in some ways, because I can understand the pain, and I think it's people who have resist the conversation as well. But I think we move forward together, recognizing that the people want to do the right thing and they want to hear. I think we can't do anything but be better for it. So
Hearing you say that you feel hope means a lot, especially
mhm.
because of your experience, and you have been asked to consult and facilitate discussions about race and inclusion and representation and diversity for, again, decades. And so you've really seen this up close and personal, and the evolution of that. Because I mean, let's be honest, Cathy. I mean, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. And if there's anything that I think I hear people, it's what can we do to fix it so we can go on about our day? And sometimes, I mean, on one hand, can we, I guess is it a two-part question, can we figure out a way to do that? Or is this going to be something that is always transforming and looks different and evolving as we go through? But then also, if you see, I mean, you see hope at the end of this.
Mhm.
What can we all do to achieve that? Because it can feel very, very disheartening sometimes and never ending.
Yes, absolutely. And I think part of that is starts with acknowledgement. I think for so long, I think in the race conversation, especially the last, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, especially 20 years, people would say, well, I didn't own slaves. I didn't, I didn't make the laws. I didn't this, I didn't that. I'm still being, blamed for that. And I think the key is that so many times you and I had talked about this more sometimes, just really that impact versus intent. So right now we have people who say that's not my intention. I want it to be fair. I want it to be equal for everyone. But the impact of the reality of our country, we need to acknowledge that. I think we have to own it. We have to own our history. We can't be afraid of it. We cannot be afraid of our history. It is what it is. How can we move forward? It's just like any major issue, for example, alcoholism. You can't move forward until you own that. And you don't have to own it personally that I did this to another group of people, but what you do have to own is that there is history, and it's an ugly history. But I'm hopeful because there are some amazing people, and especially Caucasian people who fought in the civil rights battle in the 60s with Martin Luther King, and they're still fighting today. And that's what makes me hopeful, that with more conversations, more understanding, speaking heart to heart, being transparent, caring, asking about other people's experiences. What have you seen? Going to YouTube something, or the library, and reading about history helps us, because what we've read in our current history books don't always tell the story, the full story.
I mean, think of Juneteenth and how many of us said either I'd never heard of it. All of a sudden, there are companies around the country that are saying we're going to finally recognize this as a holiday, as a legitimate holiday.
Mhm.
And I mean, I would like to think that there are a lot of us, myself included, who picked up a book or jumped on Google and said, I need to know more about this. And
Mhm.
when you and I were growing up, our history books were severely lacking, and we're learning that. And so there's a part of it that I think is it's tremendously exciting. I was listening, and I cannot think of his name, but I was listening to an NPR program the other day, and he was talking about Black history and having the importance of not just acknowledging the very gut-wrenching, horrible part of it, but that he had to, for his mental well-being, but also for his own edification and knowledge, acknowledge the amazing part of that Black history that is part of American history that we were never taught. And so he delves into both. Do you find yourself in talking so much, and again facilitating conversations about race and all that goes along with it? I mean, Cathy, how do you keep a balance for your own mental well-being?
Right. Well, I can tell you, Angie, it was a little challenging there, but I tell you, number one, let me start with that I had to even do some education for myself around Black history, because obviously Black history, we've had it, and you learn about the people about Barack Obama and Martin Luther King, and just people, Madam C.J. Walker. Those are the people that you talk about during Black History Month as you're growing up, but really you don't focus on the strength and the resilience of a people. So it's been extremely important. I had to get educated. I think I shared this with you, that one of I thought, most important things I could do is to encourage my daughter went to Spelman College, which is a historical Black college. It's a women's private institution in Atlanta. And it was so much emphasis placed on learning your history. Oh my goodness. And she's just got this sense of confidence and of who she is, different than me, and really has taught me more about my own history. I had to be intentional to understand. Obviously, I knew about the strength and resilience of a people, but beyond that, the contributions that have been made to this country, the growth that would have never happened without the contributions of African Americans who had given, who were brilliant people. And so when I look at that, that encourages me, that strengthens me. And I have to look at not just the challenges. It can be heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, frustrating, overwhelming, hurtful, all of those things. But when I look at what has been able to rise to the top in spite of, I think about just all the country. I think of an Amanda Gorman, and I think about, wow. And I just heard on the news a couple of days ago, a young man who won a young Black man, just $160,000 worth of scholarships, and is going to Hanover. I think he lives in Louisville right now. Just the contributions that we keep fighting, we keep going, and still very much successful in spite of the challenges. And that gives me hope.
What about Black History Month in general? We certainly at Extol are looking at this as a celebration, a time to have some tough talks, but also a time to amplify voices and do a lot of listening as well. And it also has brought the conversation in-house. I mean, when my husband and I started it in 2014, we'll launch the first magazine portion of what we do in early 2015, February of all months. We looked at our mission as celebrating Southern Indiana and beyond as a whole. We have taken this last year to really take a look at where we're failing, where we're lacking in terms of diversity and inclusion and representation with our, not just our publication, but all the different channels. And the conversation has also been, you know what, we've done a deep dive into Black History Month now. What are we going to do to continue it?
Absolutely.
Do you see, I mean, that's something I'd love us to not have a Black History Month because we integrate it all year round. I mean, is that something that you consider for people, that people say, okay, February is over, now
Right.
moving on?
And I do. I mean, obviously, many companies check the box and they, feel like they've served certainly Black History Month, but it cannot stop. And the good news is other companies, other people are still celebrating. And I love the fact that you guys have done a deep dive. I think it's critical that we're constantly looking at opportunities to educate people about the significance of the work that African Americans have done in this country. And we've missed that. Our textbooks don't do a good job of that. And certainly what we learn, whether it's in elementary school or even college at this point, we're not doing a great job at that unless we take an African American history course or something like that. And just to really celebrate and educate is huge, and not have it just be 1 month of the year. That's when you know the culture is changing, when in fact it's part of the culture for us to celebrate differences, whether African American, whether gay, lesbian, transgender group, whether or not it's a Latino community, whatever, that we're looking at the contributions that people make and understanding that this country really is a melting pot of people, and appreciating the value of those differences, and that's why America is as great as it is.
Oh, that's for sure. Cathy, okay, to end our conversation, I'd love to know who is or are, whether it's multiple Black history makers of today or yesterday, that somebody or multiple people you think should be highlighted.
I can tell you right now, it is multiple people for me. I mean, I mentioned Amanda Gorman. I love this young woman and all that she's contributed. I don't know the name of this young man, but $160,000, that's huge. That's significant. He is impacting our history. Pastor Kevin Cosby is my pastor. I think he is significant, president of an HBCU, as well as, obviously the pastor of the largest African American church in Kentucky, and part of Southern Indiana as well. When I think about Black history, it's not just, to me, people who we're knowledgeable of, but it's actually people that maybe even be the first to go to college in their own household. That is historical. And that sets a whole new path for their family. And so for me, I appreciate everyone who's contributing, everyone who wants to make a difference, everyone who's speaking life into especially the Black community. And that includes Caucasians and anyone else. I appreciate people who really value others. And so don't have one specific person. I can think of a lot, but all of these people are contributing in some way.
Well, I'd have to say, and I guarantee people who are watching this are thinking the same thing. Cathy, you are a Black history maker. You are affecting thousands and thousands and thousands of people. You have been working over 2 decades on ensuring that we can have these conversations across the country. And I thank you for the impact that you're making in history. If now more than ever, you and what you do and your talents, because not just anyone can do what you do, matters so much. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to be on the program and really have a wonderful discussion about Black History Month with you, Angie. Thank you so much.